in this final installment today we're going to be covering off a few miscellaneous items, including sun protection, the use of trekking poles, and all importantly, your footwear out on the New Zealand Great Walks. Sun protection is a big thing in New Zealand as well, and so there are certain items of gear that I take with me as mandatory regardless of what the forecast might be, and of course that's going to be some kind of sunscreen. I generally opt for a 50 SPF plus sunscreen. I usually take a lip balm with me that has some kind of sunscreen in it as well, because my lips tend to get quite chapped when I'm out on the trail, especially if it's a windier trail. I'm also taking sunglasses, a sun hat. Most of the time it's just a standard baseball cap type hat, but if I know that I'm going to be hiking on a very exposed trail where there's not a lot of shelter, I might decide to take a wider brimmed hat with me as well. I'm also generally hiking with trekking poles as well, and this is a little bit of a area for debate amongst the tramping community. There are those strong, stalwart, very hardy Kiwi trampers who have never used hiking poles in their life and don't need to, and they swear by just getting out there and strengthening your knees by climbing up and down these mountains. I personally find that I like to use trekking poles just to make the whole experience a little bit easier for me. So if you're using your trekking poles correctly, you can actually take a lot of that weight off of your back and put it more into your legs and your arms and spread it a little bit more evenly across your body and make the whole hiking experience just a little bit easier for you. Of course, they're also great if you're doing a lot of downhill sections, and I find that they are really fantastic at just giving me a little bit of extra stability when I'm hiking with a large pack on that's got a lot of weight. And very finally, before we finish up here, we should mention the one thing that is of course super important if you're going to be going out tramping, and that is your footwear. So most of the time if you're on a great walk, you're going to be hiking on a very well maintained, well benched, well gravelled track, and it just means that it's all been cut nicely into the landscape, and it should be relatively easy for you to walk on in just about any kind of footwear. But there are some tracks which do have some tricky sections. The Tongariro Alpine crossing comes to mind, where there is a bit of a scramble down a scree slope at one point and some rocky terrain. Also, if you're hiking somewhere like Rakiura, you're going to come across sections which have a lot of roots and a lot of mud. So again, depending on what kind of hiker or tramper you are, will depend on whether you want to hike in something like a boot or a trail runner. I've tried both over my time of hiking. I'd highly recommend to beginners that they do start with something like a boot, but perhaps that they start with a mid-rise boot rather than a full support ankle boot, just until they get used to what kind of terrain that they're going to have to hike through. If you've been around this channel for a little while, you'll know that I personally have hiked in both boots and trail runners, and I've come down on the side of trail runners in most circumstances, especially if you're trying to pick a very tried and tested trail runner that is used a lot by long distance hikers or multi-day trampers. I find them just a little bit more comfortable on the feet. I do find that they dry out a little bit more quickly, which is great if you know that you're going to be either hiking in very wet conditions or doing a lot of river crossings and things like that. But you do need to be mindful that of course they're never going to provide you as much support as a boot. They won't stand up very well or keep your feet very well protected if you're carrying a lot of weight on your back. So I do have quite lightweight gear, which is probably a little bit more suited to a trail runner than perhaps somebody who might be carrying 15 to 20 kilos of gear, who might need a little bit of extra rigidity and support in their boots. Now, I actually have made a specific video on the different advantages and disadvantages of using trail runners over boots and why you might want to consider both. I'll link that for you up here and also in the description down below. But before we finish, I will just mention that one thing that I have found really advantageous to me when I've been out on multi-day hiking trips is to have a separate pair of specific hut or campsite shoes that I can get into at the end of the day. There's no better feeling at the end of a long day of hiking when your feet are tired than to take them out of those awful cramped up shoes that you've been in all day and put them into something like a nice lightweight sandal where they can breathe and just relax and recuperate for the next day of hiking ahead. So I always carry with me a separate pair of shoes for that purpose. So that brings us to the end of this mini series on gear suggestions for your upcoming New Zealand Great Walk. I hope that you have found these videos very helpful in terms of putting together your own gear list. Again, if you found this a little bit too broad and you would like a few more specifics about what I particularly carry, don't forget to check out those other gear lists that I've linked in the description below, or get in touch with me directly either through a comment under this video or on my website. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate having you here, and I'll see you again in the next video very soon.